Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I'm going live about now. Our long waiting time is finally over. We are finally getting some actual new Apple products. Today might actually be just the start because a Monday event seems, or a Monday announcement seems rather strange for Apple. Usually it's more like a Tuesday or a Wednesday thing for them. So there's a lot of hype right now about the idea that what I'm going to talk about to you today about is actually just the start, and we might have stories going throughout the week, or at the very least throughout the weeks. But let's actually start with what is happening today. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a new episode of Mark Tech. And after months and months of speculation and expectation and going through different rumors and leaks, we finally have at least a second generation AirTag announcement. Now, it should be noted that we are talking very much AirTag second generation or new AirTag. If you remember, of course, the branding of the third generation iPad, which Apple lovingly called the new iPad, a branding that definitely didn't hold up. Now, new AirTag here does not suggest an actual new naming convention for AirTags. You know what, guys? Think I'm actually going to make myself a tiny bit smaller. I'm very important. I know you guys love some big mark action on the screen, but I think a tiny bit smaller will be a little bit less intrusive for you guys. So these are not new AirTags. It's a new AirTag generation or AirTag second generation. And as you can see from the images provided, in fact, from the fact that Apple barely shows these new AirTags as like a standalone product, and that KSB Wonders, haven't seen you in a while joining a live stream. Yeah, it's really a finally moment, not just because we are getting new AirTags today or new AirTag. I know Apple doesn't like to pluralize these kinds of products, but it's also what it suggests for the rest, right? How long have we been talking about AirTag 2? Apple TV 4K, a new generation powered by potentially A17 Pro or an A18 chip. How much have we talked about a HomePod Mini? Now, we have talked a lot about it being powered by an Apple N1 Wi-Fi and Bluetooth modem. That seems to have gone a little bit to the wayside, and instead we might be looking at a HomePod Mini powered by a MediaTek Wi-Fi chip, but at the very least that MediaTek chip might not be limited to Wi-Fi 4. So I have big hopes for this week. I hope that we get AirTag today, which admittedly is the least out of all the rumors. Like, it's no redesign. I mean, it does have a new chip, but it's a very single-minded, single-purpose chip, right? So it makes sense that this would be the first announcement, basically to wet the whistle, to whet our appetite a little bit, and then we go through the week, hopefully with new HomePods, new Apple TVs, and then finally my hope and in a way expectation for Thursday could be a new MacBook generation, M5 Pro, M5 Max MacBook Pro, hopefully featuring Apple N1 Wi-Fi modems as well. Maybe Apple C1X, or God knows, maybe some form of C2 inside for 5G capabilities. And hopefully no price increases. At least in that regard, the second generation AirTags are giving quite a good example, but don't forget the current pricing situation on the PC market, the craziness comes from RAM and storage. And these are two things that AirTag doesn't really have, at least not in any meaningful amount. And this is why AirTag 2 or AirTag second generation can afford to be the same price as the first generation model. But let's actually get through the details. As you can also see from the title of this video, we'll have more to talk about. We'll go through yesterday's Power On newsletter from Mark Gurman, which might be hinting at stuff we could see mid to late next month in February, and when we can expect new AI Siri and things like that. He also corroborates previous report that AI Siri will be basically like a two-parter, one in late March or early April, and then another one starting with iOS 27. So I know AI is not necessarily your guys' favorite topic, neither is it mine, but it's an important part of the consumer tech industry right now. It's what drives up all the stocks and shit like that. But I'm very, very happy, believe me, that we have something non-AI, even non-software to talk about. In my heart, Apple will always be a hardware company first. Now, obviously, the software that runs on that hardware is very, very important. But I just love learning about new hardware, even relatively small updates like this. Let's get through what Apple is exactly saying. Apple introduces new AirTag with expanded connectivity range and improved findability. Basically, all the stuff that we have talked about in leaks and rumors, but also just from the common sense that we understand that the new generation U series processor, the U standing for ultra wideband, that we've had in like the latest iPhones and stuff like that, definitely can now come to AirTag. I mean, it was actually kind of funny to see those kinds of chips not come first to AirTag, the device that they are most suited for, but we are finally getting the improvements that we have been speculating about for a while. The next generation of AirTag, the best-selling item finder, so there's a little bit of not so humble bragging from Apple, using the announcements of the second generation to talk about the success of the first generation. It's now even easier to locate with more powerful precision finding, a longer Bluetooth range, and a louder speaker. They could have incorporated a hole for the keychain directly like the Samsung ones. Yes, but they were definitely very much looking forward to just reusing this design. To be quite honest, because I really like these leather thingies that Apple does, I prefer that it stays the same one because I can just put it into the leather one that I already have. So I guess in a way, if you are already an owner of AirTag 1, this is more beneficial for you. Like Apple could, like if there was a keyhole in them or a hole for a keychain, it would have made it larger, right? And I think that's something Apple wanted to avoid. For example, one tech spec thing is that the original AirTag is like 11 grams, and this is 11.8 grams, right? So this is functionally like almost the same product. Apple today unveiled the new AirTag, a powerful accessory that helps users keep track of and find the items that matter most with Apple's Find My app. Now with an expanded finding range and a louder speaker, powered by the strength of the Find My network. It's interesting that despite all the cooperation that Apple has done with Google on bringing not Find My directly to Android, but basically Find My equivalency and support for Apple's Find My so that Androids can help locate iPhones and iPhones can help locate Androids and their accessories. It's interesting that Apple, in their newsroom report, definitely still mostly focuses on first party stuff, right? How it works with iPhone and everything, how it works with the Find My network. Very little mentioning of a lot of software effort that they've been themselves putting into improving cross-platform compatibility. AirTag allows users to keep tabs on their belonging every single day. Since the launch of AirTag in 2021, man, it's been almost 5 years, Jesus. Users from around the world have shared stories of being reunited with lost luggage, keys, bicycle, bags, and more. I've used it myself a couple of times, often less because I've actually forgotten or misplaced something, but just to be sure where something is. So it gives you a better, state of mind, a better feeling of security and safety. With the help of AirTag placed inside an instrument case, a musician was able to locate their lost instrument and perform that evening, while another user was able to find lost luggage that contained a life-saving medication. I suspect these should be real stories, right? Apple gets so many emails about real-world stuff, whether it's from emergency location and satellite connectivity stories and crash detection on all their kinds of products, AFib detection on Apple Watch. I highly suspect this is actually based on real stories. AirTag 2 is designed exclusively for tracking objects and offers industry-leading protections against unwanted tracking. It's available today for the same price as its predecessor. So one good thing here. Now, the euro has actually strengthened a lot versus the US dollar. So in a way, all these things are kind of more expensive in euro relatively. But yeah, very much a good situation that the pricing is the same. And also across most markets, except for where in those last 5 years there were crazy currency fluctuations. $29 for a single AirTag or $99 for a 4-pack, so you basically save $20 with free personalized engraving available on apple.com and the Apple Store app. I personally think that personalized engraving is one of the great accessory things that Apple has in their stores that really doesn't get enough promotion. Like one might think in our current like selfie and content creation obsessed market, right? Like personalized engraving, especially it being free, like would actually matter a lot more and would get a lot of attention. So you see, but even from the intro section here, that basically the entire pitch of AirTag 2, AirTag second generation, new AirTag, however you want to call them, is the same as it was before, but simply better. You get all the Find My App compatibility, all the functionality, but now you get enhanced range and findability. Apple's second generation ultra wideband chip, which I lovingly call the U2 and put it into the title thumbnail. The same chip found in the iPhone 17 lineup, iPhone Air, Apple Watch Ultra 3, and Apple Watch Series 11. Powers the new AirTag, making it easier to locate than ever before. Using haptic, visual, and audio feedback, that's all the stuff that's baked into the app. Precision finding guides users to their lost items from up to 50% further away than the previous generation. That is pretty much what we expected. I know some rumors have said maybe it's up to double the range or whatever, but yes, 50% definitely good, especially for everything that's still in your house. This could legitimately now help you where your range might have ended at some room, right? Just that extra room that might actually be needed to find it. There's also an upgraded Bluetooth chip, which expands the range at which items can be located. So there are two ways in which AirTags are basically being locatable. First is precision through ultra wideband. This is, as the name implies, much more precise. Basically, you point the iPhone, you get an exact direction and everything. You get even a distance estimation for it, which is usually incredibly precise. But it's obviously much more range limited. And there is Bluetooth, which sends the signal of the device for location. And then it uses, for example, the GPS of your surrounding products, like iPhones and your surrounding other phones, whatever, right? To basically tell the system, here I am, right? It basically writes piggyback on those devices. Basically, Apple improved both components here. For the first time, users can use precision finding on Apple Watch Series 9 or later, or Apple Watch Ultra 2 or later to find their AirTag, bringing a more powerful experience to the wrist. What's interesting here is that because these devices obviously had the U1 chip, but for some reason they didn't offer precision finding, now they do. Should be interesting that one thing that they claim here is, I don't see that here, is that the some of the improvements here need, basically OS 26.2.1, and we are currently on the official version of iOS 26.2, macOS 26.2, watchOS 26.2, right? And basically that means we should be getting some kind of 0.1 release, and I also assume a new beta for 26.3, most likely throughout this week. So first, this product, obviously, we've already mentioned the pricing, but that this product also launches today, at least for ordering. So it should be clear that this software will not be very far off. So this is basically the precision finding that you can see with the exact distance estimation. It gives you haptic feedback the closer you get. It gives you a color indication, like goes green once you get really close to something, and then even gives you like a beep beep and like a happy beep, and then shows you, yeah, you found it, right? And now it works on Apple Watch as well with most precise founding, most precise precision founding working on iPhone 17, iPhone Air, Apple Watch Ultra 3, and Apple Watch Series 11. These are all devices featuring the U2 chip, but you also get still, of course, precision finding with U1 devices, including for the first time with Apple Watch Series 9 or 10, which despite having a U1 chip, did not have that capability. For example, this also concerns me because I have an Apple Watch Ultra 2. Obviously, I have a U1 chip inside, but it didn't work with AirTags. Now it does. I've seen some people ask whether or not this makes these devices now capable of locating other U devices chips, including AirPods, through precision finding, and seemingly the answer is no for some reason. So something is holding the Apple Watch back here, which is a little bit disappointing. And that's at least the first impression that I got when I was checking all the news about this. With its updated internal design, the new AirTag is 50% louder than the previous generation. So of course, you guys know AirTags feature speaker inside them. That's to make sure you can actually make them make a sound, and then you can locate them, right? That way you don't necessarily even have to run around with your iPhone or your Apple Watch trying to locate it, but what instead you do, you just listen, right? But the other part about the speaker is that, for example, if you were a bad person and you wanted to stalk somebody with AirTag, so you threw an AirTag that was not synchronized with their Apple account into their bag or something like that, AirTag will actually let you know. Now, your iPhone will be able to tell you, oh, there is an unauthorized AirTag traveling with you. Like maybe you want to check your bag or something like that to make sure you're safe, right? It can be that the AirTag that's traveling with you is just the next person on the train with you. But it could also be someone trying to stalk you and trying to locate you without your permission. And that's what the sound is also for, so that the AirTag can make itself known. Paired with its enhanced precision finding capabilities and distinctive new chime, so that's interesting. It's not just louder, it's apparently distinctive. AirTag now makes it easier for users to find their important items, such as keys hidden deep in between couch cushions. That's true. You might know that your AirTag is like from precision finding is something in the range of your couch, right? But is it just in the deepest crevices, or is it even underneath it? Well, make it give out the chime and then check again, right? So that's basically Apple's pitch here. And because it's louder, that chime is now going to be much more likely for you to hear, and that helps. Or a wallet as they head out the door, of course, the same thing. To Find My network and share item location, Find My makes it easy to locate AirTag, blah, blah, blah. The Find My network is crowdsourced network of Apple devices that use Bluetooth tag. So this is something that I've already explained to you. The new AirTag integrates seamlessly with Share Item Location. So that's a feature that came out not too long ago. An iOS feature designed to help users recover a misplaced item by temporarily and securely sharing its location with trusted third parties. Believe me, in my family, I am usually that trusted third party. Now, there is some temporary sharing, of course, with this, but there's also like permanent sharing, and whether it's my nieces or just the main iPhone of my mom or my cousin, whatever, I am usually that person. Yeah, but there's nothing new here that much. Uh, Basically, they're saying that the systems that they have launched, like share item location, has reduced baggage delays by 26% and reduced incidents of truly lost or unrecoverable luggage by 90%. So that way, if you have lost something, you can actually if you've lost your luggage, to be more precise, you can actually let your airline know, here is the location of the AirTag. Wherever you have misplaced it, please look at least first there, right? And apparently that helps the delays be smaller, and like in 90% of the cases for important stuff, it seems to actually prevent it from getting truly lost. So down the line, even if there might be still some delay, it gets found, which is obviously great, and that's exactly what this device should be used for, not some kind of stalking, as I said before. Access is granted only to authorized personnel via secure Apple account or partner authentication. So this is a program that Apple runs with those airlines, makes sure that they are compliant with the privacy and security nature that you kind of need to feel safe about this. So that's pretty great. The shared location will be disabled as soon as the user is reunited with their item, can be stopped by the owner at any time, and will automatically expire after 7 days. I assume because after 7 days, if your luggage has still not been found, it's probably now truly lost. And of course, Apple keeps advertising what they call industry-leading security features, designed from the ground up to keep location data private and secure. It doesn't physically store location data or history on device, and end-to-end encryption protects all communication with the Find My network. So this is the same pitch as it was before. I see Angelica, one of our MarkTech Pro Max members, has found her way into the chat. Apparently a long work day. Thank you to anyone who is able to join. I know that AirTag might not be necessarily the most exciting product, but we do have more to talk about later down the line. We do have our first comprehensive Intel Panther Lake benchmark. So, and of course, throughout the week, I hope that Apple will give me more to talk about. I have a pretty not so busy week, so I should be able to go online by 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. German time every day of the week if necessary, and then we'll have a lot of fun going through all of it, summarizing it, finding auxiliary content. Like at some point I wanted to also watch MKBHD's Xiaomi 17 Pro Max video. So there's plenty for us to talk about. And environmental responsibility. Basically, all of this is very much now just continuing Apple's pitch for the original AirTag, as well as just whatever they have as company-wide priorities: privacy, security, environmental responsibility, and with it, we are getting now second generation AirTag for the same prices as before, $29 for a single model or $99 for a pack of 4 AirTag. Apple also advertises their fine woven keyring, which of course is their faux leather alternative. It's available in orange, midnight purple, navy, moss, and black for $35. I still have one that was made out of leather, so it's unfortunate that we do not get true leather anymore. Let's see. And of course, this is fine woven. So this is actually not tech woven, which is what the cases for the iPhone 17 generation are made out of. So Apple now has this weird, like, dual strategy for materials where some stuff is apparently fine for them, being fine woven. That's the predecessor for tech woven, their first attempt at making a faux leather, while others, apparently where users demand more durability and more longevity, like for an iPhone case, that ones are tech woven. So, but we get fine woven for something like this for AirTag, and for example, for the uh, for the credit card attachment that you have for MagSafe for the back of your cases and your phones. That's also fine woven rather than tech woven. So it's interesting if Apple at some point wants to make like a hybrid of the two, because tech woven and fine woven definitely feel different, and I would argue fine woven definitely feels a bit more leathery than tech woven. So maybe for these devices, Apple doesn't want to offer like the more rough texture of tech woven, but I just couldn't tell you that. Or maybe they're just trying to sell out of as much inventory as possible, which also goes, of course, well with the idea of not redesigning AirTag, so that they keep selling accessories for this accessory. That were still made for the original. And yes, we are now in a funny situation where the fine woven keyring costs actually more than the actual AirTag. So $35 versus $29. But that's about it for the AirTag story, the main news story of today. Oh, Riveting Tail Chap under a new name. Using YouTube Premium now and joining the chat. Welcome to the chat, brother. Hope you're doing all right. I know America has been a little bit chaotic and everything. I hope you're staying safe, whether it's from one type of ice or the other type of ice. That's all I'm gonna say, to not bum us out, unfortunately. But speaking of America, there's a new Black Unity Apple Watch band, which, while obviously you can buy it outside of the United States, but it's definitely very much connected to the history and the culture of the African American community in the United States. I always love these designs, and I always wish Apple might make something more like in this like super multicolored way. Yeah, nothing to thank you, Sean. Thank you for your continuous support. It really means the world here. But yeah, this is an awesome one. This is a special edition braided solo loop, but in general, Apple just makes new Black Unity band once a year. About the time we get into Black History Month, which is obviously February. We just had MLK Day and stuff like that. So there's a lot basically going into this. I'm very happy that Apple shows this respect to an important community in the United States. And I'm very happy, like, because it's very easy for companies to just pay lip service. Oh, we are pro-black. Oh, we are pro-LGBT and whatever, right? But then the products that they make out of that lip service are terrible. But I've historically always really enjoyed Apple's Black Unity bands. I probably should buy myself one finally. Like, it's just I'm so freaking attached to my leather band, my dark blue leather band, that it's so difficult for me to imagine wearing anything else at this point. But at some point it will wear out, and I'm not sure if I'll buy like myself a fine woven alternative. So at that point, I'll keep an eye out. The only thing here, of course, is that yes, similar to these other solo loops, this is $99, so this is definitely not cheap, but it is a pretty gorgeous one, and of course, it vibes pretty well with the Black Unity wallpaper or background, whatever you want to call it, on an Apple Watch. So a watch face, I know that's a term. It's just not something I use, because honestly, I have used pretty much the same watch faces for the last decade on my Apple Watch, and I'm very happy. Like, sometimes I try out the new full-faced ones, and obviously older ones evolve over time as Apple Watch gets larger screens and more processing power, so they can add more features. But yeah, I don't play around that much with stuff like this, because I need a lot more information at any given time than this. Okay, my stream seems to be working fine. Sorry, I just closed YouTube for a second on my iPad and was worried whether or not I was missing out. But this is basically the official announcements from Apple Um, this is very much what we expected to get some point early in the year. In fact, we had expected new AirTags kind of like last November, but hey, better late than never. KSP asking, what's my Apple Watch face? I put it off. It's the analog activity tracker. Let me analog activity Apple Watch face. I think that's it. Yes, this one. That one is mine. I have either calendars or weather down here. Usually these days it's weather because everything that's in my calendar, I kind of know what's like. My job is not that unpredictable right now. And it's all in one place, so I don't really need a reminder. But in university, for example, I just had my timetable there and would know what's the next lesson, what's the next lecture, where to go to. I don't need a workout shortcut or widget, whatever, because I obviously have that mapped to the action button on my Apple Watch Ultra 2, but I believe I have a battery on one side just because I'm a little bit OCD and I like to know when or if my battery is running low. And then on the other side, I actually vary it a lot. Like, sometimes it can be whatever is not down here, so it might be calendar if weather is down here, or vice versa, or it might be something like a timer or an alarm if ever need it. It's just me playing around, basically. Or what I also often have is a volume tracker, right? So knowing the decibels around me, basically for hearing health and stuff like that. That's my usual go-to setup for Apple Watch. I don't use it with like photos or anything like that. I play around with some of the full screen beautiful ones like that molten metal watch face and stuff like that, but overall I've just used this ever since it was available, right? So let's see, like if there's anything newsroom that I might have missed. Nope. On 95 Mac, let me see if there might be a new version of iOS 26. Nope, just people doing a lot of summarizing of Apple Watch, of AirTag and stuff like that. Now, one story before we get actually, because I did preload a very good video from Just Josh. I haven't had a chance to fully watch it, but I skimmed through it and looked at some of the benchmarks that they have for Intel's Panther Lake generation. But one thing that really is interesting from Mark Gurman's report yesterday. Now, I will not go through all of it. First of all, this is very long and very wordy, but this is also him just summarizing another report that we have already gone through on this channel. So whether it's going back through the history of the changes about Apple's AI, like John Giandrea overseeing Apple, eventually getting let go, Rockwell taking over parts, of course, now the entire AI section reporting to Craig much more directly. Now, of course, the partnership with Google, where they've discussed whether or not it might be smarter to have Anthropic or OpenAI's LLMs behind Siri. Ultimately, they settled on Google. That was the cheapest deal. And of course, it gives them access beyond just Google's large language models under Gemini, but actually Google's TPU-based servers. So if Apple feels the need to expand Siri functionality, but doesn't have necessarily the private cloud compute infrastructure for it, then they can still rely on Google for that. It's basically a very like stretchable deal in that way. And knowing that Apple, of course, prevailed in that $20 billion antitrust lawsuit against the Safari search deal between Google and Apple, Apple felt very much at ease at doing another kind of deal like that with Google. In September, a judge ruled that Apple and Google roughly 20 billion per year search deal would not need to be unwound. So now Apple is building another multi-billion-dollar a year deal for Google. It's just the money now goes from Apple to Google, but in a way, Apple gets to save all that money by not having to build those LLMs, whether it's smaller or huger ones themselves. Now, apparently, they are still working on their own large language models, and in fact, the versions that are supposedly coming with iOS 27 and macOS 27 are very much like still built around Apple, right? Apple calls them Foundation Models version 11. They are optimized for everything from Apple's private cloud compute servers, where we'll have like 1 trillion parameter models, but we'll also have smaller models that run everything from stuff like cleanup in your Photos app, text prediction, on-device Siri functionality in iOS 26.4. So a lot of stuff where it's getting Google tech, customizing it, and in some cases using completely Apple-related tech, build tech, if maybe in some ways Apple thinks that their smaller models are just more efficient and Google's are just simply better. Once you are the 500 billion plus parameter models, it just makes sense for Apple to be very versatile in that way and choose whatever is best, whatever runs best, and yeah. So there's a lot of good stuff happening out of that deal. I've already said I find it disappointing that Apple obviously wasn't able to get there themselves, but I'm also very happy that Apple isn't throwing all company resources at AI and compromising everything from other software development, not taking away any budget away from hardware development, or even just in general not confusing their priorities and basically saying, you know what, we can treat AI a little bit more like a utility, we can buy the basics from someone else and customize on top of it, similar, treating it a little bit to how they treat nodes from TSMC, right? A big part of why Apple's chips are so good is that they usually end up getting some of the best nodes from TSMC. But on top of that, Apple builds really great architectures, right? And that's kind of how you can see their partnership with Gemini. In fact, they're not just partnered with Gemini. Some AI stuff that's coming, for example, to the Apple Creator Studio that's launching in 2 days, that is actually built upon OpenAI's ChatGPT. ChatGPT image generation, for example, is also integrated in things like Image Playground. So Apple still is trying to play all sides a little bit, making sure that they get the cheapest deals from everyone, early access to new technologies. So there's a lot going on basically behind the scenes, even though we as customers are supposed to see as little of that as possible and just get a good end product in the end. So this is actually, and I put that even in my title, supposedly Apple plans to have an announcement of the new Siri in the second half of February. Now, it should be noted that that kind of announcement can happen in very different kinds of ways. It does not have to be a major event. It can be a smaller, more tightly controlled briefing. In fact, one thing that we do know is going to be a smaller, tightly controlled briefing is actually the way Apple is doing Apple Creator Studio, which is getting a hands-on experience from tomorrow to Thursday, actually. So that actually also gives us some room to see how Apple treats these kinds of events. I could see it being centered around some other release as well, maybe like if you remember to last year, like in February, we actually got the iPhone 16e. So maybe this time around we could get an iPhone 17e, and Apple uses that opportunity to also talk to us about a new Siri. but that's mostly speculation. But basically, we are getting somewhere in the second half of February. I assume that's also when we're going to get the first betas for iOS 26.4, because as Mark Gurman has now said multiple times, this new version of Siri, the new Siri before new Siri, comes with iOS 27. That one is supposedly launching late March, early April, and if the beta start in the second half of February, that gives Apple a nice 5 to 6 weeks of beta testing. If it need be, it can become a full 2 months and roll out sometime in April. Still a nice distance between that announcement and then WWDC in early June. So yeah, we'll actually have a pretty packed start into the year from Apple, both in software and, as we've just started to see today, and in hardware. So 26.4 Apple Foundation models. 10 internally. No. This one is Foundation models 10. It runs on 1.2 trillion parameters and is hosted on Apple's private cloud compute. But the things we are going to get afterwards, that's going to be Apple's Foundation Models 11. It's going to compete with Gemini 3. Now, that's a little bit disappointing that it might not compete with Gemini 3 right here, even though when I look at the 1.2 trillion parameter models, like that to me sounds like Gemini 3 but changed. Maybe it could be some Gemini 2.9 internal version that Apple has had their hands on for the last couple of months, and it just makes sense to get that out of the door for 26.4 before eventually switching to full Gemini 3. I assume at that point it will be more like Gemini 3.1, 3.2, whatever, for iOS 27. But yes, and then that version will also have its own app and actual basic chatbot functionality. So general chatbot functionality, I should say. So it's not going to be limited to just system inputs. And that model can then also run on Google's cloud infrastructure, which is based on, of course, tensor processing units. That is pretty much all that we now know about Apple's AI push. Now, we do know that Apple will have products based on that. For example, a new HomePad is definitely going to be a good fit for that. And we know that the hardware for that has been ready now for months and months, maybe if not a full year. So it's going to be interesting if we're going to see that new version of Siri right away with something like that. One thing that I could see even Apple do, if they actually have some kind of small event or a mid-level announcement in the second half of February, one thing that I could see is Apple actually pre-announcing the HomePad and saying, look, here's a new Siri. It's coming late in March or early April, right? They could even say by the end of spring, right? Or something like that to be a little bit more vague. And it will launch together with this new product, completely focused on this new version of Siri, and will have a lot more to show you at WWDC of this year. So again, that's a lot of speculation now on my part, but hey, some of my speculations have been pretty good in the past, to be totally honest. So let's see, is there anything else? No new betas, nothing at least for now. Let's get to something that actually has also been very much in our mind on this channel for quite a while. And I know some of you really prefer chip news over stuff like AI news or even smaller hardware releases. But hey, you have to eat your veggies before you get to something better. Before you get to the meat and potatoes in a way. I see my stream is thankfully working fine. We've been streaming for about 45 minutes, guys. Just if you're watching this and enjoying it, please leave a like, leave a comment. You know, I love interacting with a lively comment section, getting your inputs, your opinions, your suggestions. You can become a channel member right here on YouTube, or you can just subscribe. Shout out to all the MarkTech Pro Max supporters right here on YouTube. Angelica, Steve, Matt, Max and Jonathan. Actually, we finally have one of the MarkTech Pro Max supporters watching live. And of course, share the video out with anybody who you think might enjoy it, and hit the notification bell so you actually know when I'm going live next, which might this week be almost daily if the best case scenario happens, and we'll get announcement throughout the week.
I am delighted to announce that Intel...
Of course, I should note before I get into this fully, this is just Josh, in my opinion, one of the best laptop reviewers, somebody who's very fair towards Apple by acknowledging that while Apple, of course, has deficits and stuff like gaming, just from the app compatibility, but he really praises Apple Silicon, the brightness of Apple screen, the greatness of Apple speakers, the reliability and great customer support that Apple offers, the build quality in general. So he's still able to just compare and contrast it to Windows laptops, the advantages that they have, whether it's in price or in certain technologies like OLED or being 360 like hinge designs, and obviously supporting stuff like NVIDIA graphics cards, not just for games, but also for high intensity ray tracing in Blender and tasks like that. So plenty of cool stuff on this channel. Strong recommendation for you to go there, subscribe, watch their videos. Let's get started. Let's see what they have to say about Intel's new generation chips, which are of course called Intel Panther Lake.
I am delighted to announce that Intel
As always,
is
let me know if
back.
audio and video is
Their
all right
brand
for
new
you.
Ultra X9 CPU, it does live up to the hype. It is as powerful as Arrow Lake 8.
Some early ones. Of course, we are still waiting for Snapdragon X Elite 2. It's really stupid how early Qualcomm announces their X Elite chips. They talk about like, oh, we have this single core performance, but by the time they come out, there's a new generation of Apple tech. The old generation is available for cheap. Windows has responses, especially in terms of stuff like GPU performance, but then which of course matters a lot, because if you're buying Windows over a Mac, specifically because you want to game on it a bit more, well, Qualcomm, you'll have to go through a translation layer. They claim that like 80% of games are supported, but that's not saying that the support is perfect, that there are no visual issues. And then, of course, for example, on Intel's chips, you have a technology like XCSS, and NVIDIA, you have DLSS for upscaling. Now, on AMD, you have FSR, but FSR 3 is garbage, and FSR 4 is unfortunately not supported on there. So forget AMD. Let's just look at Intel SoCs and full-on like desktop adjacent laptops with dedicated NVIDIA GPUs. Yeah, like you get those newer features, better ray tracing, full compatibility. And Qualcomm makes a point that they are price competitive, much more efficient, that they finally have much more GPU power, but then it takes them months and months and months to actually release those products, really confusing everyone in the process. KSP saying everything is fine. Thank you. That always relaxes me to know that audio and video is doing well.
That's the chip that was found in high-performance laptops last year, like Asus's famous Zephyrus G16. And it's able to do this at Lunar Lake power draws, which was the chip found in...
KSP saying, I bought a Steam Deck recently, amazed how ProtonDB does wonders. Yes, but Proton is a compatibility layer. Well, there is an ARM to x86 component, and that's because of the Steam Frame, or whatever they're gonna call their VR stuff, but that's new in a way. But Proton translates from... well, there is a wine component that you can use inside for ARM to x86. That's also true. But the main thing is that Steam Deck obviously uses an x86 AMD APU, and the translation layer is basically from Windows, in this case stuff like DX12 inputs, to Linux, or more to be more precise, more open inputs like Vulkan. That's what Proton is for. In fact, it even solves some issues like not all the time, but in some games it can even solve issues like shader compilation stutter if it's poorly managed. But obviously Steam Deck is not very powerful at this point. It uses Zen 2 and RDNA 2 parts. Obviously we now have RDNA 4 on desktop. We have Zen 5 on across the board on laptops and desktops. We are about a year away from full Zen 6. And maybe 1.5 years away from RDNA 5. So I understand why one might not want to wait, especially since Steam Deck still performs pretty admirably against much more expensive Windows handhelds. But to me, I'm mostly waiting for the new PlayStation handheld that's supposedly launching alongside the PS6.
Thin and light laptops that gave you excellent battery life. This means you can finally have it all: strong CPU performance and long battery life in an x86 Windows laptop. But there's more. This new integrated GPU is absolutely fantastic.
RTX 4050 level at 40. Now, this to me is meaningless if I don't see the power consumption. Now, it should be noted that when it comes to comparing versus Radeon, again, without stuff like FSR4, the actual image quality here is going to be somewhat disappointing, even versus a much lower power consumption Intel part, because XeSS is way better. But yeah, you can see it being almost twice as fast as the Radeon 890M, which is, of course, in APUs like the... like the Z2 and Z2 Extreme chips. So yeah, definitely some good stuff. This is the CPU score here. It still beats it. I would love to see the power consumption numbers, but of course, this is based on TSMC 4 nanometer, while the CPU portion here is Intel 18A.
Performance that rivals entry-level GPUs from NVIDIA, at least at lower wattage. And because this processor is so power efficient, you can get all this performance in a super thin and light laptop that is silent and doesn't get that warm. Guys, the team has just worked super hard on today's video. Seriously, 3 people working round the clock testing a ton of laptops. I don't want to steal their thunder, so I'm going to hand over to Sierra to walk you through Panther Lake and specifically how this new Core Ultra X9 chip performs. I'll be back at the end though to wrap up on how it stacks up versus competitors and whether you should actually buy one.
Intel released a whopping 14 CPUs.
Yeah, so this is already one thing that I dislike very much. And like, what the fuck actually leads you to like this kind of differentiation? Like, I believe this is like the peak output of their neural engine, essentially. You have like these minuscule differences in top clock speeds. It's really confusing. Basically, like, with 80, you get some of the more high-end stuff.
There's a lot to sort through. In summary, there are 3 main types for 3 different types of users. First, we have the Core Ultra X7 and X9 processors that end with H. Those are your highest tier options, best for people looking for performance and who also want some performance in gaming and creative tasks. These have 16-core CPUs and a special 12-core GPU called Arc B390.
Yeah, so that 16-core consists out of 4 performance cores. That's the same as on Apple's M5. It consists out of 8 regular efficiency cores that compares versus 6 on the Apple M5. And it also has 4 low power efficiency cores. So these are meant to consume even less power, be used specifically for background processes, work together with stuff like the media engine. So while you're watching a video, all your background processors are still nicely cared for, but without consuming a lot of power. With it, you also see that between H and non-H parts, there are big differences in what memory is being supported. Obviously, LP stands for low power DDR5 that goes up to 9600s. That's the same speed as the Apple M5. These are 128-bit chips, so they have the total memory bandwidth output same as Apple, but that's on the high end. Most chips actually come in below that at 8533, and some are even like 6800, so they're basically not really LPDDR5X, they're more LPDDR5. So, and some products, from what I've seen, even though they do support LPDDR5X at least up to 8533, what you will find is because of the memory shortage, some suppliers are choosing to combine their laptops with much less powerful RAM. So instead of 8533, you will, for example, see LPDDR5X 7500. And in that regard, now you'll have substantially less bandwidth, but these are usually going to be paired with 4 GPU cores, so they're going to be way less memory bound. Yeah, KSB, you're right. Not wasting any chip after binning. Like, differentiation between like 1 TOPS. Like, this is a 2% difference. How are they even measuring that reliably? When devices have 8 cores, it's usually because they'll have like some weird combination of those cores, which will actually vary between these configurations. But it can mean, for example, 4 P cores and then 4 LPE cores, but no regular efficiency cores, and then you'll have like 6 core designs. Obviously, this is going to be competing with Apple's upcoming low-end MacBook in a way that will have like an A18 or A19 Pro chip. And you'll also see that when it comes to CPUs, we're seeing actually a small degradation of the maximum frequency from about 5.3 gigahertz on the previous generation to 5.1. So the switch from Intel N3B to now Intel's own 18A node definitely does not seem to come with an increase in clock speeds on the CPU side, but you get roughly 6 to 8%, to in some cases more, gains in terms of IPC instructions per clock. So this entire lineup is a little bit crazy. And the last one is when you're seeing this in terms of TOPS. So there's a obviously dedicated piece of hardware for AI compute. Apple calls it the neural engine. This is the neural processing unit. I mean, that's what we just call TPUs for Google's cloud. But then there is total TOPS, and that's between like the GPU, that's for the GPU, right? So you can even, well, this is just TOPS for the GPU, but you can even combine it partially with the NPU depending on the task. You'll see that the TOPS actually scales really nicely with the amount of XE cores. So you get 40 TOPS for 4 XE cores and 122 for 12. Yeah, this is, you basically have to hope that whatever laptop you want to buy, or whatever even like mini PC you want to buy, comes with maybe like 2 chips or at max 3 as options, and that they very clearly state on their laptop, their configurator, this has more CPU, this has more GPU cores, this has more CPU cores, right? Basically enjoy yourself. And then like this is like also really confusing, but I could see like you have like 50, right, in the branding of 388H versus 338H between a 12 core version to a 16 core version, and between the 10 core version and the 12 core version. But then you have 60 basically having universally the same core counts as this one, and basically just being differentiated in CPU clock speeds. It's really confusing. This one, like, if like by my logic, this should be like a 50 or 60 series inside the 300 range, right? And this should be more like a 70 under that 80. It's just so damn close. Look, it's basically it has the exact same GPU. It has the same number of TOPS. It supports the same memory speed. And in terms of clock speeds, it's 100 megahertz different. Yet in terms of branding, it's 20 lower. It's so stupid.
Next, we have the rest of the CPUs that end in H. These still have higher core count CPUs like the prior ones, but they only have a 4-core GPU. These are best suited for users like programmers, audio engineers, and even some students.
No, I would actually argue that no programmer right now would want like something this low in terms of GPU core count. Like really, you're a programmer, but you don't want to play a single, like even like a non-very demanding game like fucking Angry Birds or whatever. Like I know some people say, oh, I just like to keep my work laptop totally clean and whatever, but really, would you not want to have like a 3 times faster GPU? Like, especially if it's your work device, just making sure that like it's for whatever GPU accelerated task, you might occasionally utilize it. Just seems strange to not do that.
All of whom don't plan to be gaming or creating on the side. Both these types of processors are a direct replacement of last year's Arrow Lake.
Yeah, so this is also not confusing at all, of course. Yes, Panther Lake is still not a replacement, unfortunately, for Arrow Lake, because we do have an Arrow Lake refresh this year. And this is using older generation stuff, both across the nodes used and architecturally, but these are desktop cores, basically high core and desktop chips in a way, high core counts, lots of cache, designed to work with dedicated GPU, which Panther Lake still can. That will depend on your configuration, but obviously because this one is designed to work with dedicated GPUs, it has even less GPU performance than like a Panther Lake with 4xe cores.
H-line, the Core Ultra Series 2 chips, which also had an H at the end. These offered solid performance, but usually mediocre battery life, the latter of which Series 3 does improve on. Lastly, we have the lower core count CPUs. These will not have a letter at the end of the name and will be best for folks who stick to simple stuff like web browsing, office work, and studying. They are a replacement for late 2024's Lunar Lake. You may know these as the Series 2 chips that ended in V. They offer...
This is so stupid, and none of it is like directly followed up, right? In terms of branding, like I guess if you consider that Lunar Lake was like Series 2 and had like 200 in the name, right? But it's not a direct naming successor to Lunar Lake because it does not like continue that V stuff. It's not obviously direct as a successor to Arrow Lake. It's just so fucking confusing.
Great battery life, but mediocre performance. Now that the basics are out of the way, I'm gonna
Yeah, those basics were not very basic, unfortunately. Yeah, but it's not her fault. She did a good job explaining.
over a couple gotchas to be aware of. As always, Intel just couldn't keep it simple.
No.
Biggest thing is the fact that not all Core Ultra 7s will perform better than a Core Ultra 5.
Yep.
There are not...
And also, like, why are Core Ultra 7s a 350H? Right, instead of a 3, like you already have the X9, and first of all, you don't even need that differentiation with the 5 if you're gonna have the branding in here. But I guess Ultra 5 is just the summary for all of these, so it's like a sub-branding, while this is like sub-branding. But why is the 5 for devices with 2s and 3s in the middle? Ultra 7 is for devices with 5s and 6s in the name, and then 9 is for devices with 8s, but this is so stupid.
H7s, and there are 5s that end in H. That letter at the end will help you determine performance better than the number at the beginning. Secondly, there are many Ultra 5 chips. 2 have 12 cores, and at the other end of the scale,
was really
2 have
dramatic.
6. So be careful which Ultra 5 you buy. Another thing, there is a third GPU option in one of the Ultra 5H chips. The Ultra 5 338H seems to be a slightly cut-down version of the X7 and X9 chips. It has a 10-core GPU instead of a 12-core one. We think this chip has the potential to offer really strong price for performance, so we're excited to get it in. As Josh mentioned in his outrage video, Intel's naming sucks.
Yep.
We're really confused why this one doesn't also start with X like the other three, plus all the other issues I already brought up.
Okay, at least
All right,
they're very honest.
I've kept you waiting long
This is
enough.
what I'm saying, guys. They are very honest people here in that regard. They will tell you their opinion. But let's actually get to the benchmarks.
Geekbench. The X9 chip performs...
So, M5 seems to outperform it slightly in multi-core. You will see tests where it comes below it, like in Cinebench, but in Geekbench it seems to be ahead, primarily because, of course, its P cores are way, way more powerful, right? We're looking at an almost 50% gain in single-core performance, from 2900 to 4300. So this is monumental, obviously with the M4 Pro, though this seems to be a lower performing single core M4 Pro on their part. Like most that I know are like 3950 to 4000 with this using Zen 5C or Zen 5 dense chips. This is actually a chiplet architecture between a huge 40-core GPU die and two 8-core Zen 5 CPU dies. So this is a very expensive chip to make. It's using older nodes at 4 nanometer. And to be honest, its architectures are not very advanced at this point. Yes, it can get you nice single core results. I'm saying my audio is clipping. Can you let me know if maybe it was my microphone just a little bit too close? Or is my OBS having some kinds of issues? No sound now. Can you test on your part if it's something wrong with you? Because for me, it seems to be working. Yep, and my OBS also shows that it's reacting. Maybe it was just for a moment. Because I did, I did pause the actual video. Maybe you mean that. The video is on pause. Maybe it's that. Oh, I can actually see, yeah, my iPad. What? Wait, what?
Well in multi-core.
Wait, no, something killed my audio here. Hey guys, can you hear me again? My video is actually a little bit behind in terms of. Oh man, I'll try to clip this out or to cut this out from the stream. No idea what's actually happening here. Okay. Is it clipping or is it just not working at all? My iPad's also like showing some weird results. Guys, let me know in the chat how it's working for you. We're gonna reload my iPad YouTube video. Okay, I don't like, is my video also misbehaving or is it just my iPad slow internet? Showing some weird results. Guys, let me know. Okay, my iPad now seems to have fixed this. And it seems to also have access to other video quality. So I hope it's all right again. Let me know if that changes. I have no idea what happened. Maybe the cable came loose a little bit and it was enough like to keep it charging, to keep my microphone connected, but not to transmit the data. Yeah, and it's my iPad shows me that it's working now. So I'll get back to it. And thank you to anyone obviously informing me, specifically KSB right now.
It lands between the Arrow Lake H chips of last gen in the IdeaPad and the LG Gram Pro. It does better than AMD's Ryzen 9 chip in the Omnibook.
You know, guys, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to label that portion of the video as tech issues. So that way you'll know how to skip that and then get back to the actual material. I'm not sure how much of my commentary has been lost through this. I hope it's not too much, but I also hope that it's all pretty self-explanatory. We only see one benchmark thus far, so hopefully we'll very quickly transition from this problem. But yeah, basically we're seeing it slightly underperforming the M5 in terms of multi-core performance. KSP, you're saying no sound yet. No, that's not on you. I have sound here on my iPad. Yeah, my sound is definitely working now. It's just that the video itself is not on.
And Qualcomm's Snapdragon chip in the Slim 7X as well. The MacBook Pro with the M4 Pro chip and the Flow Z13 with Strix Halo have a very solid lead here. These are also laptops with powerful CPUs and great integrated graphics. The MacBooks also maintain a very large lead in terms of single-core score in all our graphs. The reason we're comparing to expensive devices like the Macs is because the X9 is the highest-end chip. We expect it to be found in laptops ranging from mid-thousands to mid-2000s.
Yeah, and this is also partially the problem that seemingly the... First of all, this is the 35H, right? This is not even the highest-end part. I have no idea what's happening here, right? And yeah, like 1 terabyte, 32 gigabytes, don't get me wrong, that's obviously more than you get in the base configurations of Apple. That's what you would have to pay $400 more to go from 512 and 16 gigabytes to 1 terabyte and 24 gigabytes actually, but usually Macs will perform better than Windows in terms of RAM usage. But yeah, this is definitely going to be an expensive chip. You will have to pay extra for these configurations. Okay, KSP, you seem to have now... I don't know, KSP, I actually think this might have been a you issue, but you confused me, and then my iPad struggled with my 5G, and that caused it to mess it up too on my end. So I actually had a part where I might have not had issue. So just restart your YouTube. Thank you for letting me know anyway. I know this will happen occasionally. It's my fault. I should have a larger live viewer base. That way you guys could debate that amongst yourself, but I'm still grateful for your input.
We'd love to be wrong if it's cheaper, though. This is just how we decided which laptops to show. Now, on to Cinebench, which tests Mac's performance. We're currently transitioning between Cinebench 24 and 26 since it just came out, so some of our graphs will be using the older 24 version until we're completely done with the transition. In 24, the duo...
It's okay, KSP, you can be sorry. That's what super chats are for. Just kidding, it's all fine.
keeps up with the M5 MacBook Pro in multi-core. It beats laptops with last gen.
So yeah, this is Cinebench 2024. Obviously, there's a newer Cinebench. So this is where the MacBook Pro M5 here now obviously has a massive lead in single core performance, right? So way beyond obviously even what is reasonable in my opinion in one generation, where one chip is technically newer, right? And here you will see it's actually over 50% faster, so 50% more here would be plus 65, but it's plus 69, very nice, right on top of that. And in terms of multi-core performance, you'll see that they're very close, almost margin of error, depends on what you like. It's probably not that important, but yes, in terms of single core, Apple here is absolutely king. And mind you, this is a chip that has 4 P cores, so it's not sacrificing single core for a lot of cores or whatever, right? It's Intel 18A, so it's a node that's supposedly ahead of like the upcoming TSMC 2 nanometer in a way, or it's least at the very least, it should be ahead of TSMC's N3P that Apple is using on the M5. Obviously, we see that even the M4 is leagues ahead. So, Yeah, and then in multi-core, just once Apple gives you more P-cores, more E-cores, it's just a completely different game. And yes, with the 395, because it has 16 desktop class Zen 5 cores, it's a completely different discussion as well. But the power consumption here will be monumentally higher than here or here or here, right? So here we're definitely gonna feel the difference of like a 4 nanometer node, older, less efficient architecture, no presence of E-cores to speak of, and stuff like that.
Chips landing near the top of the graph, still lagging behind the M4 Pro Mac and the Flow with the Strix Halo chip, aka AI Max 395. In 26 Cinebench, they renamed the tests to be more accurate as single and multi-thread. Here in single-thread performance, we actually see a lift over last generation from the X9 388H instead of their tie in 2024. About an 8% improvement here. Clearly, 26 Cinebench has some new optimizations for newer processors. Unsurprisingly, the Macs keep their lead. In 26 multi-threaded performance, it's a similar story to the other graphs. The X9 maintains great Arrow Lake H performance while still falling behind our 2 highest-end chips on the graph. Now, what this performance doesn't show you is efficiency, which this new chip does quite well. In case you haven't seen this graph before on our channel, we plot Cinebench performance on the y-axis and average power draw along the x. Lower power draw and higher performance.
Average wattage. Why is the max? Okay, this is because it's an M4 Pro. It doesn't beat the M. Why are you not comparing M4 Max? I mean, we are soon getting M5, but whatever, right? M5 Pros and Max chips. AF M5, very close here to the Snapdragon chip. I always doubt some of these numbers for the Snapdragon. Multi-thread score, like, this is not the greatest graph for efficiency, but okay.
Is the goal here. This is important because in a laptop, more power consumption can make the laptop feel warmer, have louder fan noise, and shorter battery life. Unlike last gen, Intel is now ahead of AMD's Ryzen 9 HX.
Yeah, like, is it really this close? This can, like, Panther Lake has, like, a node advantage, a crazy node advantage of 18A versus 4 nanometer. It has a higher proportion of E-cores, where 8 are E-cores and 4 are LPE cores. Why is it really that close to the HX 370? I'm shocked. This is actually really bad results for an 18A chip. Is this a bad architecture, or is 18A like a dud of a node?
370 Strix Point chip. It delivers slightly better performance at similar power draws. We only just got a laptop with AMD's 2026 Gorgon Point N, and this Panther Lake X9 CPU appears much more efficient than that.
Yeah, because Gorgon Point is like designed to give you slightly higher clock speeds than Strix Point. But man, that's not enough, is it?
2. Their Strix Halo chip, which launched last year, however, was a big leap, as you can see in pink on the graph. Where people might...
Yeah, because it has more cores to spread this task on. It's not really more efficient in that regard.
Prefer Panther Lake.
This is not the best graph to show actual efficiency, in my opinion. Like, why is the M5? Oh, this is the M5. Oh, I'm sorry. That was the 2. Oh, I'm sorry. I mistook this for... I mistook this one for the M5. No, but the M5 is here at like 26, 27 watts, delivering this. Oh yeah, now it actually makes sense, because it is consumes a similar amount of power to the Snapdragon chip, but just genuinely gives you more performance. And then at the highest end, you would probably push that Qualcomm chip even further, especially now the upcoming X Elite 2. Okay, so I mistook a couple of colors. Forgive me, I'm a man. I'm slightly
power consumption can make the laptop feel warm. Intel is now ahead of AMD's Ryzen 9 HX 370 Strix Point chip. It delivers slightly better performance at similar power draws. We only just got a laptop with AMD's 2026 Gorgon.
But this also doesn't make sense. Gorgon Point is just not optimized for 85 watts. Like, if this was like a Halo, yeah, but like you can see it even starts to underperform beyond 65, 66 watts. Why even test it at that, right? Like, I mean, purely for mathematical ideas, I guess. But yeah, you can see the HX370 also started to fall off after 61 watts, and now Gorgon Point starts to fall. But the fact that Gorgon Point in this graph performs less, this could be just it could be like laptop-related variance, to be quite honest.
Point N, and this Panther Lake X9 CPU appears much more efficient than that, too. Their Strix Halo chip, which launched last year, however, was a big leap, as you can see in pink on the graph. Where people might prefer Panther Lake is its lower power draw, which means it will be found in thinner and lighter laptops. Comparing the 16-core X9 to an 8-core Lunar Lake, it has the same power draw.
But this also, like, this doesn't actually suggest that it's more efficient, right? Because what if I took then the 395, if I undervolted it, right? Basically, I underclocked it even through something like a balanced power consumption in the device, right? And then like now it drops to performance. But look, if you normalize at 40 watts, you get 4,200 here or 4,300, right? And here you'll get 5,200. So that suggests that this chip is actually more efficient. That's weird. Is this like some early driver issue?
While delivering 60% more performance. This is fantastic. This doesn't surprise us.
Yeah, versus Lunar Lake. Yeah, which Lunar Lake was always pretty inefficient.
Though, as higher core count chips tend to be more efficient.
Yeah, in the maximum Cinebench. It's not actually like this graph needs to be also made just for single core to be actually relevant for regular usage. If you're just going to drive the chip to the max, it becomes very unrepresentative of actual use.
Sure, the 8-core Panther Lake versions will maintain this efficiency, but we'll get those numbers to you as soon as possible. Rounding out this graph, Apple's M5 10-core is still more efficient, and the M4 Pro 14-core is even more impressive. Same hypothesis, the 14-core M4 Pro has more cores, so we believe that's one of the...
But also it has fewer efficiency cores. So in terms of actual efficiency, this chip is less efficient across most operations, right? It's just the fact that, yeah, if you're gonna max it out, it's gonna be better because you can use the P cores at slightly lower clock speeds to still get a massive bump. M4 Pro has 10 P cores, 4 E cores here, while this is 4P plus 6E, and you can run those 10 P cores here at lower max clock speeds than these ones to still get really high results.
Reasons. One of the benefits of better efficiency is usually lower CPU temps and less resulting heat and fan noise, which holds partially true in the Duo's highest performance mode. Its CPU temps stay very reasonable, under 90 degrees Celsius on average.
So I've seen people basically complain about those core clock speeds, those core temperatures on the Mac. I have basically nothing to say here except for one, why is the M5 missing? Because I think it's actually more interesting here. But also, these temperatures are okay for small bursts. These are usually not really like average temperature at 105 is really hard for me to believe. I don't in Cinebench, yeah, which again, this is like so unrepresentative of the actual experience. Why do we not have single core results? And I'm not saying that to benefit Apple. I'm just saying that really helps actual understanding of how a laptop will actually behave and how much power it will actually consume and how hot it will actually get in regular usage. Plus, using Cinebench 2024 and Cinebench 26 is already out.
Internal CPU temps is more dependent on each laptop's specific cooling solution, so this may change on other models. Also, Josh wanted me to mention the MacBook Pro getting very hot here is not as bad as it seems. Compared to Windows manufacturers, Apple keeps their devices close to silent and lets them run hotter as a trade-off. He uses max fan control on his to up the fan speed a little. Still inaudible to him, but it keeps his cooler. He hates that Apple makes him do this, but it does work. Regarding heat you feel during performance tasks, Panther Lake looks promising. But the Duo is a bit of a unique device. There is an additional layer between the components and the keyboard than a normal
so this is a
laptop
stupid product. This is that dual screen bullshit that we have talked about when Panther Lake was originally designed, introduced. I hate this. To me, it has zero practical benefits. It just impedes on everything else in the device, like cooling, more space for batteries, at least in a space-efficient way. What for is my question? Because when we talked about that device with the rollable screen at CES, right, where the screen would expand from the edges, well, at least I could tell you that's so you can have ultra wide for actual movies rather than 16:9 for YouTube. You can have it for ultra wide games. You can have it for multi-app setups where you could have basically two pretty widescreen apps next to each other rather than almost like two square apps inside 16:9. So yes, that immediately showed to me its benefits. This is basically like a dual screen, like not even foldable, right? In the true sense, like the two portions, I guess, fold against each other, but the screen isn't foldable. So that results in some weirdness, to say the least, because what do you then fold it upwards? What for? Like for stock monitoring?
since the keyboard is detachable and sits on top of the second screen, so keep that in mind. The Flow also has a detachable keyboard, but it doesn't have any components underneath it, so its keyboard temps are irrelevant. Looking at fan noise, the Duo is on the upper end, but
Well, it's not irrelevant, it's not a meaningful comparison, but for the end consumer, the fact that the keyboard will always stay cool even at full load is actually a good benefit. It's just that obviously then you have to accept the compromises of like a tablet setup in Windows.
this doesn't tell the full story. We also test its different performance modes, and balanced is a much more reasonable option here.
Yeah, and this is, you can actually see, because this number aligns pretty well almost, right? 40 to 46 watts, you basically get 100 points in per watt, right? Here, you'll actually get 120 points per watt, right? And here, you'll get 150 points per watt. So you could actually draw a really nice efficiency curve out of these numbers. And yeah, we also see that fan noise, obviously, you really get diminishing returns from going with those extra 15 watts. Like you'll have much more fan noise. Don't forget 10 decibels, because it's a logarithmic scale, will double the output volume. Now, because the fans, because of how the fan curve works, it actually reduces the temperature of the keyboard because the fans spin up so fast and so loud. But yeah, max recorded power draw, that's the scaling for the overall device. That's also why these numbers are like a little bit misleading sometimes, because max power draw usually is not very sustained. It would lead to much higher temperatures and everything. The devices are usually not built around that. Even like the Dell XPS stuff, like they've talked about the way they differentiate between like max power consumption and the fact that they didn't even go with the highest power consumption possible configuration for their Panther Lake chips. And then CPU temperature keeps climbing up even though you're increasing the fan noise.
Performs 13% worse, sure, but we'd still recommend balance since it maintains most of the performance. The fan noise is nearly dead silent. 42 decibels.
Yeah, but you can also see now that we reach like M5 level performance, right? M5 level power draw. The M5 now takes away like a rocket in terms of actual like performance.
Low enough that I have to turn off our AC, and my door has to be shut to actually read it properly. Ambient volume in my room is about 39, so this was truly quiet for the performance it was getting. In your average room, it's completely silent in its lowest mode. After looking at
Yeah, I guess like 40 decibels is usually considered like almost like bass level noise, like what you'll usually have around you in most rooms. That's just for everything that just happens in regular life. If you actually, if you were to go into a sound isolated room where you basically have 0 decibels, right, except for everything that you do, like breathing and speaking, it'll drive you insane. We humans are just not attuned for a world without noise. It's just even the air circulating around us but creates noise. But I wouldn't say that 39 decibels is entirely silent. Most of what I hear is more about 35 decibels is where you'll hit that. Obviously, if it's something can run entirely silent without adding any decibels to your environment, because that also matters, right? Noise kind of accumulates if you have everything on, right? If now you'll have to make the speakers louder so they aren't drowned out in any way or distorted by the fan noise. So yeah, obviously if you want that, then you will get to something like a MacBook Air.
We can see why manufacturers like Dell might be limiting the average TDP to 35 watts in their XPS 16.
That's exactly what I was.
They probably decided the performance was good enough for most people, and they wanted to minimize distractions like fan noise. Anyway, this was about what we expected to see for CPU tasks. We were promised...
Well, and that's actually disappointing to me. I'll be honest, I think these are pretty disappointing numbers.
On par with the older Arrow Lake H with Lunar Lake power draws, and that appears to be true. This is positive. But this chip honestly blew us away in GPU tasks.
Okay.
For example, in TimeSpy...
Which actually, that GPU is actually built on TSMC's 3nm node, right? So the best part about this Intel chip is a portion that's built on TSMC. So that should just tell you still something.
Between the lower wattage 40...
Wait, but... Okay, you'll need to name me the wattage, though. Otherwise, it doesn't matter to me.
50 in the MSI Thin, and the mid-wattage 5050 in the LG Gram. Very impressive. What it also does well here is CPU performance, and this is likely due to its efficiency. You'll notice the Flow's integrated GPU performs the best here, but it falls behind the Duo in terms of CPU performance, even though it was beating it earlier. This is likely because the Flow pulls power away from its CPU cores to give to the GPU cores.
Yeah, and that's also especially the problem with like really unbalanced big dice, like the AI Max chips from AMD, or especially for a setup where you have a CPU and a dedicated GPU, like you'll have on many Windows
where the Panther Lake
laptops.
CPU is performing very well at low wattage. Continuing on GPU performance, we were also very impressed with the addition of ray tracing cores in the Arc B390. It makes it pull ahead of the Thin again and compete with the 5050 in the Gram.
Okay, so the scaling here, yeah, makes sense. Pretty cool. 140V. This is now over double the performance. 140T. Do we not have like a Lunar Lake chip directly against it?
Yeah. Not to mention, it's an insane 86% uplift from Arrow Lake H.
Yeah, but that's Arrow Lake H. I'm not interested in Arrow Lake H. I'm interested in Lunar Lake.
Nomad Lite, which is a cross-platform 1440p benchmark that the Macs can also run, it actually beats the M5 here by a bit. The dedicated GPUs and higher-end chips keep their lead.
Okay, and now this is where we need power consumption numbers for very important context, right? Because we know, for example, that the M5 generation, and we'll see that in some Blender benchmarks, is way better at ray tracing. Still, Nomad Lite does not utilize ray tracing. That's fine, by the way. I'm obviously very happy with these chips focusing on rasterization, which is still the predominant rendering mode, especially if you're going to target lower-end games or lower quality settings. But I want to know what the power consumption difference was. Was this actually running at 30 watts and this is over 60 or something like that? Please.
But this is once again a massive improvement over the integrated graphics in prior chips. When gaming at full HD resolution and high settings, which is what we test on weaker hardware like iGPUs, The Arc B390 holds its own against low-end dedicated GPUs being fed less wattage like you see in the MSI Thin. It also gets more than 60 FPS, which is certainly playable for a AAA title. Not to mention, it's absolutely crushing the integrated GPUs in both of its predecessors, Lunar Lake and Arrow Lake 8.
Oh, so 140T, I guess, is Lunar Lake. What are these fucking names? Or is V Lunar Lake? I always thought V was Lunar Lake.
Moving over to Forza, the story is similar. It gets over 100 FPS, while Intel's older iGPUs are only hitting 60. It's getting beat by dedicated GPUs.
4060, 4050. Yeah, okay. Makes
But
sense.
it's still doing better than most.
But here, actually, power consumption would really matter, right? Because if it is underperforming a 45-watt 4050, now this chip will have other advantages, I would admit. Like, it has access to way more RAM than a 4050, and I would probably get it over a 4050 and definitely over a 60-watt 5050, and definitely like at 4050 at 80 watts is just wasted money in my opinion. That extra performance I would gladly get back in extra efficiency and extra memory, but I would love to know the actual efficiency. Is this using 30 watts and this is using 45 watts, right? Because at that point, it's not actually that much more efficient. It gives you 50% more performance for 50% more power. Obviously, over this, I highly assume it's going to be more efficient as well. But these are important numbers. You should have the
integrated ones currently available. In Marvel Rivals, it does okay. This is a newer benchmark for us, so we don't have it run on everything yet, but we see it keeps its 1% lows above 30 FPS in medium settings, which is more than we can say for Arrow Lake H. This is a more demanding game with lots of fight scenes, so if you're playing competitively, you'll need to lower your settings. Now, Intel would be disappointed if we didn't mention that these chips offer multi-frame generation, which is a first, other than NVIDIA last year. XeSS technology has improved to allow for 3 frames to be added for each real frame. Gamers go back and forth on whether this feature actually leads to a better gaming experience, but if you want more frames, FPS in Cyberpunk does shoot up by 82%. 1% lows don't seem to improve though, so keep that in mind. This is unfortunate, as most people would prefer to see an improvement to 1% lows than average FPS.
Performance
this lack of
is
scaling
magic.
of 1%
Here,
lows with frame
the
gen
actual
on
usage of
also happens on some
XeSS
NVIDIA
upscaling
laptops.
is more important
Using
than
gaming
frame
results as our
generation.
marker, we have another efficiency graph for you. This is a newer graph for us, but what I did here is measure the frames per second in the Cyberpunk benchmark. I then plotted it against the average GPU power draw during this test.
That's cool.
To get the same performance as a dedicated NVIDIA RTX 4050 in this game, around 65 FPS, the B390 draws 33% less wattage. It also draws 55% less power than an RTX 5050.
Why is the 5050 so inefficient here, but okay.
This is super cool to see. It seems like Intel is much more efficient than NVIDIA. When drawing similar wattage to the M5's 10-core GPU, it gets 31% more frames per second, which is also very good. Intel beating Apple is crazy. Strix Halo chips, unfortunately, do not.
It would be interesting to see that across more tests. I'm not denying that Cyberpunk on Mac is okay, but we are still waiting for the Metal 4 version that's even better optimized, a version that has better upscaling, that has ray reconstruction. And that port was good, but it was pretty basic. But I would love just more tests. It's good that they are starting to do this. Hopefully, they'll be able to add more games to this, more benchmarks and stuff like that. Blender.
Not separate their CPU and GPU wattage in our measuring tools, so we couldn't add AMD's integrated Radeon 8060S to this graph for comparison. As a whole, that chip was showing around 61 watts total during Cyberpunk, so we are doubtful that the GPU cores are pulling less than half of that. This leaves Panther Lake in the lead here in terms of FPS per watt. By the way, Cyberpunk doesn't hit the GPU as hard as Forza. We have a video about why we use Forza for most of our testing, which I'll link below.
Interesting.
We didn't use Forza here because then we couldn't compare to the MacBooks if we did. Again,
there are other games that you could test that shouldn't be that difficult to test. There are some other cross-platform games like Baldur's Gate 3 even. Obviously, World of Warcraft, stuff like that. But yeah, I understand why Cyberpunk is just the one most obvious one right now.
Leads to less annoyances. Gaming
We are potentially looking at Cyberpunk getting a mobile port. There's been a discussion of Cyberpunk 2 internally in some PC leaks and rumors where you would get an actual mobile version. And obviously, if Cyberpunk uses whatever Mac code it currently has and further optimizes it for iPhone and iPad, well, then we could see some extra efficiency come out of that. But also, one thing that slightly confuses me about this graph is M4 Pro, right? So M4 Pro here consumes a tiny bit more power. We're looking at 28 watts of maximum, even less actually, like 26, 27 watts of M4 Pro. That's the fully enabled 20-core version. And you'll see that in that regard, it's a pretty like understandable benefit. So obviously more GPU cores, just as we've discussed with CPU cores, you can run them at slightly lower clock speeds, hit much more advantageous part of the efficiency curve. And obviously you have 20 cores more here. You have double the cores over the M5, but an older core generation. So an M5 Pro will easily outperform it. But I'm still a little bit confused by the M5 being beaten by this amount, right? Like, if you told me because of software and everything it's worse, I would believe it. But I would more put it like here in a very well optimized title, which Cyberpunk is well optimized, just not very well optimized. And I'm not gonna play Dame Tech here. This is not an excuse to say, oh, developers do better, right? Like whenever Android loses, whenever the 8 Elite Gen 5 loses against A19 Pro, some people will claim, oh, it's because it's better optimized on iOS. I'm not saying that in the same way, but obviously macOS and Windows are very different comparisons than iOS to Android. Different architectures, way different history of app and game support. So but yeah, it's interesting that they didn't actually mention the M4 Pro. This also should mean I wish they had included the M4 just for generational comparisons here, but I assume the M4 would be somewhere here. Probably like less efficient as well, but also a little bit less power consumption. But also, like, to anybody who like tested the M4 Max recently and said, oh, that one goes up to 200 watts. Yeah, if you combine max CPU, max GPU, and like almost like a power virus test load, yeah. But you'll see the M4 Pro uses like 25, 26 watts. Even if you quadruple that, right, to an M4 Ultra, that still wouldn't be even 100 watts. So yeah, this idea that like Apple has been beaten efficiency, not according to them. Here, obviously, I agree that the M5 is beat in Cyberpunk specifically. But I'm talking about some tests that recently showed the Mac Studio being pushed to like 215 watts. And I'm like, yeah, maybe in like a temporary spike, but no, simply
draws
no.
50 footage in our measuring tools, so we couldn't add AMD's integrated Radeon 8060S to this graph for comparison. As a whole, that chip was showing around 61 watts total during Cyberpunk, so we are doubtful that the GPU cores are pulling less than half of that. This leaves Panther Lake in the lead here in terms of FPS per watt. By the way, Cyberpunk doesn't hit the GPU as hard as Forza. We have a video about why we use Forza for most of our testing, which I'll link below. We didn't use Forza here because then we couldn't compare to the MacBooks if we did. Again, power efficiency leads to less annoyances. Gaming in balanced mode was a treat. It stayed quiet, didn't get too warm. The 100 FPS number in Forza from earlier was actually from the Duo's balanced mode, because it does better in that mode.
That is bad. Like, I know, like, don't get me wrong, I appreciate that you can get more power out of the balance mode, but it is mighty confusing for a regular customer to have to go from performance to balance to get more performance out of your chip.
Probably because it gives its GPU more wattage. Here's the breakdown for each performance mode. The Duo can get up to 54 decibels if you're putting it in its highest mode, but we don't see the point. As we said earlier, measuring the heat on the keyboard is a bit weird with the Duo, but Josh even said the little Slim 7i Ultra at CES also didn't get hot while gaming with its full wattage X9 processor. Other compact 14-inch laptops with dedicated GPUs, like the Zephyrus G14, can get insanely hot, so we are hopeful these thin-in lights will keep their cool. For AI, we did a quick LM Studio test to see how it does with the standard wolf, goat, cabbage question. This is using a 14 billion parameter model, and we use the same seed.
Yeah, that actually to me makes sense. This kind of difference, it has more power consumption, more cores, but they should be pretty close given that the overall bandwidth is pretty similar. Obviously, M5 also has a newer AI generation over M4 Pro, so it makes sense that despite this having way more cores, the difference isn't actually that high. That should also mean that hopefully an M5 Pro, if it scales similarly to how M4 to scale to M5, it should be getting close, if not exceeding, that 8060S number, and obviously M4 Max here will outperform all of those.
It does a little worse than the M5, but better than the LOQ with the 5050, which weirdly seems to struggle with this test.
14 billion should fit into the RAM envelope here.
It also does better than Arrow Lake and Lunar Lake. Now, we of course had to see how well it performed for creators. We'll start with video editing benchmarks like Premiere Pro and DaVinci Resolve. In Premiere Pro, the Arc B390 GPU seems to do well, much better than most integrated GPUs, and it's not far behind the M5 chip. This means less complex projects like ours are viable to edit. It's a good step forward from the older Lunar Lake and Arrow Lake laptops without a dedicated GPU.
It does not say what exactly is leading to that improvement, whether the encoders and stuff like that are also better. I assume it's mostly based on the GPU. But hey, yeah, you'll see roughly anywhere 10 to 20 to, in some cases, 25% slower than the M5 is roughly where in overall compute, it's probably where it is. But you can also see that this benchmark also has some very clear diminishing returns at some point. Now, the M4 Pro does have lower single core performance, and its GPU is a worse architecture than on the M5. So it should definitely go at least above 7,000, 7,500 with the new generation. But also, like, given power consumption, I know M4 Max is very expensive, but it will actually consume in many tests less power than this 80-watt 4050, right? We saw the M5 consume like 17, 18 watts. We saw the M4 Pro with 20 cores consume like 26 watts. So even if you double that, even over double that to like some point in 60 watts, you're looking at less power consumption than these. So while yes, it's a more expensive system, I think the M4 Max should be included.
But it's certainly not competing with most dedicated GPUs or higher-end MacBook Pros.
I mean, the difference here is not actually that huge. I mean, overall, I would argue that the real-world difference is probably higher than this benchmark suggests. But yeah, you can also see here that exports here. This is actually where M5 Pro could really go to town, especially if it also if it gets all the architectural improvements of M5, all the extra cores that we know from the M4 Pro, maybe potentially bumping this up from 20 cores, 20 GPU cores to like 24 GPU cores. But then you add on top stuff like potentially faster storage, like M4 to M5 double the storage speed from 3.5 gigabytes per second to 7. If this one doubles from 7 to like 14 or 15 gigabytes per second, and I mean the A19 Pro has doubled the storage speed of the A18 Pro. M5 has doubled the storage speed of the M4. It's not too far-fetched So, and Apple could use that storage speed to advertise storage as like, oh, your RAM models will load instantly into your RAM and everything like that, right? So this could really, really take another leap forward. And then again, don't forget the actual power consumption difference here is going to be huge. And these are exactly the tasks where I would love to see how much power gets consumed by them. Because, yeah, meaningfully, is there a big difference here in terms of performance between the M5 and the B390? No. If my priority was actually still like Windows compatibility and pro apps on that platform and everything like that, customizability, potentially lower price, whatever, right, this wouldn't hold me off. But if this suddenly consumes 30% less power while being faster, therefore giving you roughly like 50% more efficient result, now I could be swayed to ignore the benefits of the B390 GPU here.
You can see that specifically when you export the project. Time is money for professional creators like us, so we still don't think these are at that level yet. In DaVinci Resolve, it falls behind the competition a bit, but it's still 46% better than Arrow Lake H, which is a nice bump.
Yeah. This is where single core performance goes to rule. This is why the 10-core M5 can perform faster than a 40 GPU core Radeon 860S. But then you have the advantage of a very, very high CPU clock speed and like a very advanced architecture with RT, and still, even though it's worse than the M5 per core, but you get more cores across CPU, across GPU. You get almost double the bandwidth. This is a 120 8-bit bus with 9600 megatransfers per second RAM, while this is a 256-bit bus with 8533. So you basically get like 80% more bandwidth.
This is somewhere the MacBooks excel, and the flow with Strix's Halo stays near the top as well. We also test 3D rendering in Blender, where the Duo did very well. It beat the Flow and even one of our...
Oh, wow. Jesus Christ. This is like a multi-generational difference. Like when you think how most things develop, you would probably... like, and this doesn't have any other advantages, right? This does not have a larger memory bus. This does not have faster memory. Definitely doesn't have more GPU cores. And this is it's not on that much of a newer node when it comes to the GPU. The GPU here is N3E versus N3P here. But then technically you have a better CPU node, if you believe at least Intel statements here. So also, they're using Blender 4.2.3. Blender 5 should be way better at utilizing newer chips, including Apple's chips, but also I would argue Intel probably benefits here too. Like Blender 4.2 definitely was not built for this.
Gaming laptops with a higher wattage.
Also, highest performance modes. Given that we've seen some balanced modes, like the scaling, right? Now the power this could literally be over 2 times more efficient in ray tracing, right? It's already a lot faster, just in raw speed, right? Now imagine if this actually consumes less power while delivering that speed.
4050. It didn't beat the Macs, but hey, there's a reason they're the go-to for creatives. It's still cool to see Intel improving so much here. Now, another place we were very impressed to see Intel do well was in battery testing. This goes for both performance tasks on battery and also battery duration for light tasks. Mm-hmm. The Duo is able to maintain full performance in Cinebench.
So the efficiency on Apple's chips remains completely undefeated. Because you are getting, obviously, all the power while still plugged in. This even here on a device that doesn't even grow its battery, right, but still gives you full power for a chip with double the GPU cores, almost double the P cores, right? More than double the P cores. So yeah, this is actually really interesting, but let's actually get to see the battery itself.
When unplugged.
Battery life.
This is somewhere the flow falters. This is also something Macs do very well.
Yep.
And Although Windows manufacturers have gotten better about it in recent years, it's still nice to see every time it comes up. When I saw this, my immediate question was whether or not it could still game on battery, since most gaming laptops nuke their performance. NVIDIA graphics cards just aren't fed full wattage unplugged. So good news, the Duo maintained full performance in gaming, getting around the same FPS numbers in Forza.
That's actually
this
very
gets it
admirable.
very close to both the Grand's
And
RTX 5050.
yeah, this is also where like the 50-50 results to me become utterly meaningless, because I would never buy a 50-50 system over this if I get the same performance at lower power consumption with more access to memory, a less complicated device that generates less heat, lasts longer. Yeah, of course.
And the Flow Z13, because they both see drops in performance when unplugged. A drop of around 21% and 28% respectively. The Duo even has more stable 1% lows, which makes Panther Lake look pretty good. As far as battery life for lighter tasks goes, like office work, the Duo actually beats our M5 MacBook Pro.
It's really, yeah, like... okay, 19, let's just go for 99 divided by 17.5 hours, right? That's consuming 5.65 watts per hour, while this is 72.6. Oh no! I'm actually doing the calculation in reverse. 14.5. No. And this consumes, so this is 10% more energy efficient. So this is a larger battery, but these are very close. These are very close. I'm not denying it. And it's definitely, in that case, then more efficient than the M4 Pro.
Let me say that again. The Duo actually beats our M5 MacBook Pro.
I mean, yeah, with 27 more watt hours.
Intel deserves a round of applause. The Duo's 99 watt-hour battery is, of course, a major contributing factor, but this is still impressive. Just to even the score, we did normalize our battery results as if each laptop had a 70 watt-hour battery.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, yeah. And this is the calculation that I ended up getting. I wanted to have a number that's better than like 5.5 watts per hour rather than 5 watts per hour. Yeah, this is a good way of putting it, basically.
The Duo then came in second, but that's still a good result. Now, we didn't have time in this video to test battery life while gaming, but that's still a good result.
Office productivity tasks. Okay, I would love to know like if there's any inefficiency in office loads on Mac, but obviously that would be very nitpicky. I understand. We need to have some cross-platform software we can test, and Microsoft Office is like has Apple Silicon optimized versions. It is even on the fucking Mac App Store. So yeah, I fully understand that.
Now,
sorry, I have
we didn't
a very
have time in this video to
itchy
test
knee.
battery life while gaming, but let us know with a comment below if you want us to do that. Now I'm going to let Josh close us out.
All right. As you can see, this is a big step forward for Intel. I kind of think this is Intel's M1 moment.
No, but okay.
The chips itself, not
I mean, Lunar Lake was already... This is a bigger Lunar Lake.
as huge a leap forward as that one was, but there's still such an improvement, and the laptops with them, guys, are also just so strong that I think people who buy them, they...
But it really matters what they're priced at. Like the fact that like the Dell XPS is like $300-400 more expensive versus the previous generation is really not a good
hold on to
sign.
their laptop a really long time. Guys, there are still people who bought one of those original MacBook Airs with M1 way back in 2020, and they're still very good today.
Yeah, I have an
Now,
M1 Max,
comparing these
which
laptops
obviously
to
is
Apple's
much more
current
premium than a
MacBooks,
base
we
M1
do need to be
MacBook Air,
careful
but-
which Apple MacBooks we compare them to. I saw this article saying the Yoga Slim 7i Ultra is a MacBook Air killer. Guys, this is absolutely not a fair comparison. It's just pure clickbait.
Yep.
Laptops with this X9 chip, they're probably going to range around $1,500 to well over $2,000. These will compete with Apple's MacBook Pro range,
Yep.
including the models with their higher-end Pro chips.
Yep.
As we've
Which
shown
have
you,
not even
Panther
been
Lake,
fully
it does
updated
compete
yet.
very well with a base M5 chip, but it doesn't do that well versus a Pro chip.
So this is why I was surprised why she didn't mention that number here.
That being said, Intel laptops, of course, have many other factors that make them better than a MacBook.
Yeah.
Broader application compatibility, especially in games, diverse form factors,
Yeah, this is not a diverse form factor in my opinion. This is a bad form factor. What do I get from this? Can you tell me what I get from this? What, like, I only have one pair of eyes, right? It just requires my eyes to roam so much over a short distance. If I wanted this kind of multi-app setup, I would just use a fucking monitor.
bells and whistles like dual screens, touchscreens, and two-in-one capabilities.
Yeah, but I have my iPad for all of that, and it's way better at all of these tasks because it doesn't create like a weird phone. Yes, is it a more expensive setup? Sure, of course, but it's just also much more fun.
As a whole, I think these new Panther Lake laptops will be very competitive with Apple's range.
Again, the competitiveness with Apple is meaningless here, right? What matter? Like, why are you not doing more AMD comparisons? Is it just by default? Like, if you get anywhere close to Apple, you become competitive. But if you beat out AMD over 2x, now it's meaningless completely to compare.
Now, compared to laptops with Qualcomm's X2, we still have a lot of testing to do here. My gut is this: Qualcomm is kind of giving you more of what you don't need from their chips, CPU performance.
That is correct. That is actually correct. I agree with that.
But they aren't solving enough of what you do need: broader application compatibility.
And GPU performance, and not just performance, but actually like newer features, like a competitor to Apple Metal 4, XeSS, AMD Cephas 4.
Although they are improving there, I feel Qualcomm is still going to be relegated to competing based on price and value. Now, compared with AMD, which is probably Intel's biggest competitor, AMD, bit of a mess right now. Their Strix Halo processor, which is really good, just isn't available in many laptops. Then their mainstream Gorgon Point chips, they're basically a rebrand of the chips they released in 2024.
Correct.
Back then, those chips were really far ahead, but now Intel has just caught up. In fact, because of Intel's GPU, they're solidly ahead. If the same laptop had the choice of a Panther Lake X chip or a Gorgon Point 1, that AMD laptop, it really needs to be around $400 cheaper. Well guys, what do you think? Will you be buying one of these new Panther Lake laptops? And if you do, you know what I'm going to say.
Great! This was actually a really fun video. While I was actually looking up some Apple news while I was finishing up. So obviously by the end, the summary was pretty clear. Okay CPU gains, gen on gen, multi-core, somewhat competitive with Apple's M5, but at much higher power consumption levels. GPU actually pretty competitive with Apple architecturally, losing maybe on some tests like RT related stuff, but obviously once you account for the app compatibility when it comes to especially games, it just becomes a meaningless thing. It's just better than AMD, and that's what ultimately matters. And in that case, you should be getting it over Apple as well if you really care about gaming. Now, when it comes to Apple, we are actually getting new software right now, 26.2.1 for iPhone and 26.2.1 for the Apple Watch. So there is some new stuff. I will, if there's new beta releases, which could come out any minute, if there are any, I will install them. So I'll have something to talk about in the next video or so. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Obviously, the headliner was the new Apple AirTag story, but I was also very happy to discuss with you the latest Bloomberg Perron report and go through some Panther Lake numbers. Maybe we'll find even more in-depth testing. Well, we'll actually see more in-depth power consumption comparisons. I kind of expected a little bit more of that, but this was just their first Panther Lake review, so I understand they might have been a little bit time limited in getting that out for a day one test. Seeing if there's anything I've missed here. Seemingly not. So I will not be installing 26.2.1, at least not right now. Apple does point out bug fixes here. So obviously you guys know I've talked about the one bug that I needed fixing is the crackling of the speaker on my iPhone 17 Pro Max. So I hope if this fixes it, that 26.3, the next beta, also fixes it, but we'll have to see. I'll keep you updated. And once 26.3 is official, if hasn't fixed it by then I'm going to the Apple Store, handing them my iPhone, and hopefully getting a new one without that speaker crackling issue. But that's about it for today, guys. Thank you so much. We've actually managed to put out a 2-hour stream today. Thank you to everyone who tuned in, especially UKSB Wonders. I'm glad that seemingly there are no actual big tech issues happening. Hopefully during the next stream we can avoid any kind of confusions about that. Really wouldn't like that to happen when we discuss, for example, the MacBook Pro. Hopefully by Wednesday or Thursday, God knows what will happen. But yeah, if we'll get a week of announcements, my predictions are still HomePod Mini, Apple TV 4K, and M5 Pro and M5 Max MacBook Pro, and of course the Apple Creator Studio launch that was already confirmed for this Wednesday. Guys, if you enjoyed this, subscribe, like, share, comment. Whenever you catch me live, you can support me directly here on this channel via super chats or super stickers. You can become a channel member right here on YouTube. Shout out to all our MarkTech Pro Max supporters. You can also support us over on Patreon, but also I left the link to the Discord in the beginning of the live chat. I'll actually leave it again in the regular comment section, as well as some timestamps so you guys can more nicely filter out that tech confusion part in the video. And hopefully I'll be back really soon for even more exciting content. As I said, I would, beyond obviously all the upcoming Apple stuff, I would also like to react to potentially MKBHD's video on the Xiaomi 17 Pro Max. It also got a review on GSM Arena, which is a website that I really admire for their in-depth reviews. So yeah, there's some stuff for us to react to across the board. As I always try to point out, this is an Apple-centric channel, but we react to a lot of other stuff in the consumer tech market, whether it's Intel CPUs, SoCs, AMD CPUs, GPUs, SoCs, NVIDIA GPUs, and soon SoCs like the upcoming N1X. That one definitely is going to be a really interesting competitor to Apple's processor, especially since it's going to have like a 5070 class GPU. So a lot of interesting stuff for us to explore ahead. And I hope you stay with me. I'll see you guys then. Gonna give you, before I go, some big Mark action at the very end, even though Riley isn't here to really appreciate it. But thank you guys so much. As always, let me know what else you would like to see me cover next, beyond all the new Apple stuff. And I'll catch you then. This is MarkTech, tuning out.